Hello Orchid friends, welcome back to my channel. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day, staying healthy and staying safe. In my collection, I have two Liodoros, and I've had these two orchids for about 5 or 6 years. It's been a few years, and in this video, we're going to look at both of them. So start off, we're gonna look at the ones that's bigger, the one on the left. They are actually purchased at the same time, but the one on the left tend to be growing a little faster with more leaves, and hence it's in a bigger container. And then the one on the right, the smaller one, has fewer leaves and the root system is smaller, so I actually put it in a 12-ounce cup, a smaller one, versus a 16 or maybe 18-ounce cup. But later you'll see both of them in and their root system respectively. This orchid overall is one of my all-time favorite orchids to have, for its fragrance, for the way the flowers look, as well as just the way it blooms sequentially. This orchid in my care typically would keep its spike for another year to bloom for the second time, and then it would die off, and then the next blooming season it would then put out a new spike. So in other words, each spike usually can live after 2 years. But I have seen some other Liodoros that can keep the spikes for a lot longer, so it may still have to do with the age of the orchid as well as just how big the orchid is. Maybe it's still not as quite established and mature as the ones I saw online. And here's a video clip of the bigger one of the two. My Liodoro somehow still looks a little different than some of the YouTubers on their Liodoros, and I suspect that it's just because there are a few slight variations, even though they're all called Liodoro, which is a cross between Phalaenopsis devonteriana and Violacea being the pollen parent, and devonteriana being the pod parent. I think there are still some variations, like I've seen some babble or bubble varieties, and then there's Sweet Memory M, which I also have two in my collection, but that's another video. And these two are specifically Liodoros. And here you see some roots have already grown out from the drainage holes at the bottom, which is fine because I use double cup method, so the roots coming out are still somewhat contained. And if they're at the bottom of the cup, it actually is quite nice when I decide I want to kind of go between traditional setup to more of a semi-hydro setup. I would just let the outer cup to have a little bit of water at the bottom, and then the roots coming out would be in contact with the water, which would then absorb additional water if the orchid needs. But I would always make sure it would just have a little bit extra so that the roots are not always soaking water excessively. And here you're looking at the smaller one. The smaller orchid of the two was working on its third flower. It opened the first two first, and then the third flower came a little later, which was fine. And eventually I was very lucky to have both of the orchid in full bloom. They have a little bit of overlap, so I was able to put them side by side. Later in the video you'll see the side by side video. I really enjoy this orchid's fragrance because it's really sweet, and it's almost like honey plus something sweeter. It's a very pleasant scent, and obviously for this kind of fragrant orchid, most orchids in my collection that are fragrant usually have their strongest fragrance in the morning, And some people say it has to do with light exposure, some people say it has to do with the wind, or whatever it is. They're most fragrant. Their fragrance are most detectable in the morning, and then in the afternoon after 3 p.m. the fragrance start to fade, and then the next morning it will become very fragrant again. And I think that makes a lot of sense because the fragrance is probably to attract pollinators, and pollinators are most active in the morning. So I think that makes a lot of sense that these orchids would, put out their fragrance this way. My Liodoros have more red in its flowers and less the yellow portion, but if you look online, you see quite a few other varieties that may have a little bit more yellow in the flower around the edges. That's why I said my Liodoros look a little different than theirs, but for the most part, I think they all have similar resemblance. This one is a smaller of the two, but after I had repotted this orchid, it also took off in terms of root production. The reason I put this orchid in a smaller container was because I just didn't think that it had enough root system to go into a 16 or 18 ounce cup. This is probably only a 12 ounce cup, or maybe 10. And I also double cup it, which allows me to go between, again, traditional setup with no excess water at the bottom, or between and the semi-hydro setup, which would have some water toward the very bottom. And for this orchid, these two orchids actually, I usually give them water anywhere between 1/4 cup and 1/8 of a cup, so half of 1/4 cup sometimes, depending on what I see, depending on the season and how I think they how much water they should have or would need. The bigger one obviously usually get 1/4 cup. The smaller one, sometimes I do give it 1/4 cup as well, but sometimes I even cut that amount in half, so it would be 1/8 of a cup. I don't really spray the aerial roots anymore because I have so many other orchids, but I used to do that, and I think it's okay. It doesn't really help the orchid all that much. But for these two, when I had a fewer amount of orchids, I do from time to time spray down the roots that are exposed or above the medium, and they seem to be fine. So it's up to you, because I recently got a question about whether I constantly or periodically spray down the aerial roots. I used to do that, but I don't do it consistently, and not with the amount of orchids that I have. I just don't find that being a sustainable approach. I really don't have the time, really. I have just over 100 orchids, big and small altogether, so I've got to find a very time-efficient way to take care of them. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!